Senator, before we get to your report on China, I want to ask about unconfirmed reports this morning that President Trump does intend to sign the border deal to avoid another government shutdown. It was just a couple of days ago he said he wasn't happy with the deal. Do you expect the president to sign it?
I don't know. I mean, we'll find out, obviously. But I think it's interesting. You know, a few weeks ago, I remember Speaker Pelosi saying that the president wasn't going to get a penny for the wall. He's getting more than a few pennies. And I also, remember them saying that there would be nothing done on the detention front. And of course, you see that where the expansion of beds so that these dangerous criminals will not be released because of lack of space. So I think there's things for the president to look at here and say that we've made progress. And I also think that the way the deal is structured gives the president the flexibility without having to exceed his constitutional powers to do additional construction, to make real progress on constructing the border barriers, be they wall or whatever they are these days, and slats or what have you, but to secure more border, which is one of his fundamental promises.
So are you talking declaring a national emergency? Do you see him perhaps tapping into that option?
No, that's what my point is, that I think that given the way it's structured now, there is money within the budget, and that the ability of the president to go and access some of those funds without having to declare a national emergency and use those funds on top of the money being appropriated in this is still preserved in part of this deal. So I think the president's going to get 1.37 or whatever the number is billion for new construction. But then I think he has a pot of money to add on top of that, not the full $5 billion, but additional barrier wall funding without having to declare a national emergency.
All right, I want to get to your report on China from your Small Business Committee. You say that China threatens our economic framework, our national prosperity. You go as far as accusing Beijing of industrial espionage and coercion. Is China really an existential threat to the U.S. right now?
Well, it's the first near-peer adversary that this nation has faced since the end of the Cold War, and it is the most comprehensive one that we have ever faced, certainly in our modern history. The Soviet Union was not an industrial adversary or competitor. The Soviet Union was a geopolitical and military competitor, but not an economic, technological, or commercial one. In the case of China, they have identified the key industries that will define this new century, and they intend to dominate each one of them. And look, to their credit, they're investing a lot of money in this, but they're also stealing intellectual property, and they're also forcing our companies to transfer intellectual property. And they're also undercutting our companies by subsidizing their own so that they can low price our companies in various fields around the world until they're put out of business, and then they'll dominate it. So there's a lot to be concerned about here, and we need a national strategy to react to it before it's too late.
Should we even be holding trade talks with a country that's challenging our very future?
Sure, because ultimately our hope is not to contain China. China is a powerful country. It's going to be even more powerful. They're going to be an important player in the world for the next 100 years and beyond. The point is to have a symmetry, balance. What I don't want to see is some dangerous imbalance where a nation that doesn't respect, or a government, I should say, that doesn't respect human rights and the dignity of all people, you see that in the jailing of Uyghurs and others, is the most powerful nation on earth, and the U.S. declines in comparison. That would be dangerous for the world. It would be dangerous for peace, frankly. So what I want to see is a balance. I want to see symmetry. I want to see, and that's not what we're headed right now. And that needs to be corrected.
I want to talk a bit about stock buybacks, which is also in this report that you released yesterday. You're now on the same page as some of your Democratic colleagues, calling for limiting these buybacks and instead pouring that money into employees and capital improvements. You're proposing raising taxes on capital gains and removing what you call the tax advantage that stock buybacks have over dividends. What exactly does that mean?
Well, I'm not on the same page. My Democratic colleagues want to make it almost impossible and want to do all sorts of things to make it difficult for a company to carry out a share buyback. I'm not asking that at all. I'm just saying that there are two things companies can do with their profits, be it from increased productivity or from a tax cut. They can give it back to shareholders, and the traditional way to do that is through dividends. And now the stock buyback option has become available, but it allows you to defer that. You increase the earnings per share percentages, and then you're able to defer the taxes on it. I'm arguing that if you choose the route of giving it back to shareholders, that's going to be legal. It should just be treated the same across the board, whether it's through a dividend or the increase in the value of those shares through a stock buyback. If, however, you decide that you're going to immediately immediately invest that profit back into increasing the productivity of your company, that is something that we should be incentivizing and making permanent, because that creates jobs. That creates incentive for more investment. Investment in this country and the growth and productivity is not growing fast enough in comparison to some of the other activities. So we're not banning the other route, we're just making the other route equal no matter how you return it to shareholders. But we do want to create a preference for reinvesting it back into your business to increase productivity, innovation. In essence, if you want to increase the value of your company, it should be through new products, new construction, new hires, new markets, expanding that company, because that is good for the American worker, the American economy, and the American people. And our public policy should reflect our priorities, and we should have no higher priority than the dignity of work and creating dignified work for Americans.
Senator, at the end of the day, is it really the government's place to tell a for-profit company what to do with their money?
Well, first of all, we're not telling them what to do with their money. Second of all, we do it now. I mean, by saying in a share buyback that you are able to defer taxes on it, you're giving preferential status to that transaction. We do it every day. I believe in the market. I'm not saying that we should tell companies how much they can pay people or how much they need to invest. It's up to them to decide that. We're not dictating to them what to do with their money. We are creating the conditions of what happens if they do it one way versus another. We do that now. Our tax code does it all the time, this very day. And we cut and reduce taxes all the time on activity that we believe is good for the country. That's why capital gains is taxed lower than, and investment income is taxed lower than ordinary income is, because we believe investment is good for the country. All I'm saying is let's continue to reorient that in a way that reflects our priority. And our number one priority in this country right now should be to increase productivity, which is a result of investment. Investment in new technologies, new innovations, new product, new workers, new facilities, new capital. And that's what we want to see happen.
Do you anticipate any legislation around stock buybacks?
I do, and we'll be ready to offer that here soon. We have to take a little bit more input on it. Anytime you tinker with a tax code, it's complicated, and we want to make sure that we can foresee all the potential unintended consequences. But it's important for everybody to understand here, I'm not trying to ban anything. I'm saying if you're giving money back to shareholders, absolutely, there's nothing wrong with that. That's good. Go ahead. But we're going to treat all of those transactions the same. But what we're going to incentivize, we're going to treat that fairly, but what we are going to incentivize is reinvesting it back into the productivity of your workers and your business. That's what we want to incentivize. That should be our national priority, because if you combine the decline in investment back in businesses and the flattening of the growth and productivity with the flattening of government investment in research and technology and development, you start to understand why it is. It goes right to the heart of what you were asking earlier about China and the threats we face moving forward.
I want to get your thoughts quickly on Venezuela, because you've certainly been out in front pushing the Trump administration to force Nicolas Maduro from power. Do they need to do more beyond sanctions and supporting the opposition?
Well, first, I haven't had to push him at all. The president's actually been more aggressive about it than I often counsel. The president raises this issue with me more than I've raised it with him, and they deserve a tremendous amount of credit. As far as should we be doing more, let me say this belongs to the Venezuelan people. This is not a U.S. initiative. It's not an international initiative. It is an initiative of the people of Venezuela, and we stand here to support them in what they are asking for. What they are asking for is to recognize their legitimate government, which we have. They've asked us for humanitarian aid, which the U.S. stands ready to deliver. In fact, is already delivering over 60, 70 metric tons that are now, positioned and ready to be distributed. More on the way. The humanitarian aid is now positioned in Colombia on the part of the United States. We know that some is going to be positioned in Brazil on the part of our international partners, and it's ready to come in. And we stand ready to deliver it to whatever non-governmental organization the legitimate government asks us to turn it over to, so that the people of Venezuela can have food and medicine and not die of preventable diseases or starvation.
All right, before we let you go, because it's on everybody's mind, do you have faith that we're going to avoid another government shutdown on Friday?
I'm optimistic that we will. Government shutdowns aren't good. Actually, I think they're dumb. They're really stupid. They're not good leverage for anything. And I think one of the things that's certainly been learned here in the last few years is that there is no issue in America that the American people are willing to shut down the government over. We all have priorities we believe in. I am a strong supporter and believer in border security. I don't think the way to achieve it is by using a government shutdown as leverage. So I expect we'll be able to avoid it. But this is an issue we're going to have to continue to work on, because we do have a major problem on the U.S. border and a major problem with illegal immigration.
Senator Rubio, thanks so much for your time this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you.